Hello, and welcome to What's the Big Idea? I'm your host, Michele Tuck-Ponder. Today's episode is brought to you by Destination Imagination, commonly referred to as DI, which is the leading creative problem-solving experience for children. Through DI's innovative, project-based educational experiences, participants gain the skills that will set them up for success in careers like the one we're going to talk about today. Learn more about DI at www.destinationimagination.org. On today's episode, we are pleased to welcome Chawne Kimber. Dr. Kimber is a professor of mathematics and the newly appointed dean of the college at Washington and Lee University. She most recently served as head of the mathematics department at Lafayette College, where she co-created the summer program to advance leadership in STEM. In addition to her accomplishments in mathematics, Chawne is a renowned visual artist, and her quilting work has been featured in museums and galleries throughout the United States, including a show at the Paul Mellon Art Center and a residency at Appalachian State University. Her piece entitled The One for Eric, inspired by the death of Eric Garner, won first place at QuiltCon West in 2016. Joining us today from Easton, Pennsylvania, please welcome Chawne Kimber. Welcome to What's the Big Idea?
I'm so thrilled to be here. Yay.
Well, I'm very excited. And in the interest of full disclosure, I have to say that Chawne and I know each other because she has been a teacher. She's taught me, and many people who are listening to this broadcast know I'm a quilter. And Chawne has been my teacher. She has been my inspiration, not only in quilting, but in her stands on social justice and her voice for speaking your truth. So I want to say that in advance and welcome you. I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm excited too. It's an honor to know you, Michele. You know.
Right back at you. So one thing I don't know, I know a lot about your quilting, but I don't know a lot about yourself, your background, and your job. I know you're from the South, though, correct?
100% Southern. Yeah, my father's family is from Alabama. My mother's family is from South Carolina. So you would call us a blended family because those are very different Southern cultures. The coastal cultures, right? My mother's Geechee Gullah, if you've ever heard of that culture. And that could not be any more different than the mountains of Alabama. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, still deep south. It's right on the Georgia border. And so that really very much colors who I am in terms of how I deal with person to person. Living near New Jersey for a while has really illustrated some of those sort of regional differences in sort of local cultures. But I don't know. What else do you want to know about me?
Well, how did you end up at Lafayette College?
Well, the very crass way of saying it is that the market for getting hired as a professor just depends on who retired or died the previous year. And so Lafayette actually had 4 openings the year that I graduated from graduate school. And I could not be more thrilled to be associated with the other 3 people who were hired with me that same year. In fact, 3 of us interviewed at yet another small college at the same time and all ended up going turning that school down. So we're a bit notorious as a small group of professors.
Were you always a math person?
So, again, that Southern culture, right? Women were not supposed to be into science and technology. And so I hid it for a long, long time. So when I took calculus in high school, I even like put extra book covers on it. So, but it's such a big book, people knew what it was. But I put flowery paper on the outside so that I wouldn't be marked as a math nerd. But I truly was. That was the class that really kind of captured my interest. But I was an engineering major when I started at University of Florida, and it's such a ginormous university where your classes are just 1,000 students at a time. But all of my math classes were small because I was a bit more advanced in the sequences. And my math professors kind of knew me as a person and were very encouraging of what I was doing. Whereas the engineering professors, I still hadn't met any of them yet. And so I ended up changing my major, mostly because I was being treated as a person, but also because the courses just got getting more and more interesting over time.
Okay. So was there a particular moment in it where you kind of looked at engineering and then you looked at math, or a mentor or an experience where you said, I'm shifting, like I'm going to do something different?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I kept so you have to take a certain number of math electives for your engineering degree. So while I was taking all the intro science courses, I was pretty advanced in the math classes. And I took this abstract algebra class with a professor named Jorge Martinez, who, by the way, later became my doctoral advisor many years later. But he was, and he recently passed away, but he was just sort of, uomo universale, just this broadly interested in everything, not just math and science, but he wrote novels and he was into, good food and wine, and just knew how to be a good person while also being awesome at doing math. And so it gave me this sense that I wouldn't have to give up anything of who I am in order to be a mathematician, and that he would engage his young students in these broad ranging conversations from the beginning, recognizing your full humanity, really kind of engaged me on every possible level. And so it was very easy to give up those classes with 1,000 students where I was just a number to my professors in physics and chemistry and engineering.
So what inspired you to keep going, though? Because you had a BS, and you could have just gone off and done something else, but you pursued a doctorate, which is pretty awesome. What inspired you to do that?
Two things. I am a competitive person, and both of my parents had master's degrees. And so I decided I should get one more degree than they had. But I never I decided that pretty early in my life, but I had no idea what field it would be in. And it just ended up being that math was the right thing. And the year that I graduated was a pretty bad recession. And so there were no jobs to be had. I had thought that I wanted to do a job to take a break from school. And I ended up being path of least resistance was to go to grad school. And then once you're in, you're hooked. It's a bit of a cult. And you really kind of buy into this system of, being broken down in your first year and rebuilt to be, it's not as bad as it sounds, but maybe actually it is. But you kind of start to feel yourself transformed into a much more capable thinker, generally speaking, not just about math, and your critical capabilities just increase, and your analytical, and so I kind of bought into this system of being rebuilt and kind of then set off into the world to do good things with these new skills.
Which is what you do as a professor. I have a math kid. My son is very skilled at math, and he has two parents who are not. We fight the notion that there is an answer, and he always finds the answer. And so I'm really interested and encouraged by what you're saying, because as a Black young man, there is some fear that I have about him finding that person to mentor him. So you started a program at Lafayette called the Program to Advance Leadership in STEM. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Is that about mentoring kids of color or any special group, women, whatever?
It absolutely is. So I, along with the director of engineering at the time, her name's Sharon Jones, and she's now out on the West Coast somewhere. But she and I kind of noticed that there was a deficit in terms of the diversity of students earning honors at graduation in our STEM majors. And so we developed this program that would meet students in the middle of the incoming class. So it's not a remedial program, and pull them out, give them a bunch of enrichment at the beginning of their college careers, then provide 4 years of mentoring in the hopes that they would come out with honors or just becoming academic leaders, but then also setting them up for true success in their careers afterwards. And so we particularly focused on women in STEM, which is also still at a deficit in the United States, and minorities, people from low income households, those who were first in their family to go to college. And then also Lafayette has a geographic weirdness in that most of our students come from the 3 states nearby. And so the donor who funded the program is from the West Coast and wanted us to also focus on geographic diversity. And so it's a mishmash in terms of all those characteristics, because almost any student could qualify under all those categories, but we make sure it's half women. And then from there, it's probably the most diverse group that a student could be in at Lafayette.
Mm-hmm. And that's a formula that works, that mentoring and that support, and early on letting young people know that this is the path. It's not you. You're not, there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah, we're deliberately tearing you down to build you back up.
No, we don't do that. We are absolutely meeting the student where they are and showing them the path that they can take from where they are when they come here. None of it is about fixing them. It's actually about us finding the ways to fix the institution to fit more people in.
That is very, very cool. At DI, we focus on the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And one of our challenges is reaching populations who don't have the opportunity to learn and exercise those skills in the STEM space, or it's in the STEAM space more for us. But how do you use those 4 C's in your work? Do you find that those are skills that are important in your work, whether it's as an administrator, which I know it's a big part of what you do, and also in the classroom?
Okay, so let's recap the 4 C's. You said communication,
collaboration,
creativity,
and critical thinking.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Those 4 C's are everything that I do. Okay. So critical thinking is about being analytical and not accepting things for face value. So mathematicians are some of the worst people to try to have a conversation with, because we question every sentence and the logical construction of what you're trying to tell us. We want to make sure we fully understand and see how one thing follows from another. But in particular, that's what helps us have really robust science programs, right? So math is the language of all the sciences, and that critical thinking is at the base of what we do in STEM. We are highly collaborative. So all of my research is done in concert with other faculty members. And it is all about the additive property of 2 people working on something, making it better than any 2 individuals could do. Communication, absolutely, no doubt. Mathematics is a very verbal science. Again, it is all constructed on the logic of our language. But also just being able to communicate as a teacher is it's almost all that I do as a professor, is to communicate to different audiences, understanding how to calibrate the language, understand the different goals of different conversations, and to be persuasive when need be. Communication, collaboration, creativity. Oh my goodness. So new things only come from being creative. If we just accept tradition and only do traditional things going into the future, then we aren't going to make any progress. And so it is a highly collaborative and creative thing that we do in our industry as mathematicians, but also in STEM overall.
So what has been the biggest challenge in regard to doing all these things during COVID?
Yeah. So certainly for me, I've been teaching over Zoom, doing remote teaching, and all of my communication is remote. And that is hard. There's so much in the body language when we're talking to people. There's so much that's revealed about the struggles that my students might be having, no matter where they are, whether they're on our campus or at home, and dealing with additional struggles that wouldn't be there if we were in the regular learning environment, that are kind of hidden when you're on Zoom. And so it takes a little extra effort for me to reach out to my students as individuals and make sure that they're being taken care of. And it's just, the job is probably 4 to 5 times what it normally is, because we can't just deal with what the cues you normally just pick up on because you're in the presence of your students.
I absolutely understand that. Well, we're going to take a break for a moment, and we will be back with Dr. Chawne Kimber.
Do you enjoy working with young people? Are you looking for a way to make a difference? Then you might be a great team manager for Destination Imagination. A team manager serves as a mentor to a team of 7 students and guides them through the creative process. DI provides training and a flexible schedule, then the rest is up to you. DI teams are forming all over the world, but we need you to put your local team on the map. Help us empower the leaders and innovators of tomorrow. Volunteer as a team manager today. Find out more at destinationimagination.org/thebigidea.
So we're back talking to Dr. Chawne Kimber, professor of mathematics at Lafayette College. And I'm interested in trying to figure out the nexus between your work and your interest and expertise in mathematics and in visual art. What's it like to be involved in both of those fields? And do you find there's overlap in your skills as an artist and mathematician, and vice versa?
So I think that there are interesting avenues of thought to pursue in thinking about what creativity means to different people in the world, right? So my creativity as a scientist, I think, plays out differently than my creativity as a visual artist. And part of that is that I am improvisational in the artwork that I do. I just follow instincts, and I do a lot of yes ands. So just accepting the outcome of one step and then using that to progress in the creation of my art. Whereas I'm more intentional in my science and my science creativity, it is governed by a set of rules that can be overbearing from time to time. And so in one space, I'm free, I'm liberated, and in the other one, I'm confined in some ways. And so there is a difference there, but there is a way in which that they enhance each other. By practicing being improvisational, I think that it makes me a little freer in the creativity that I pursue in my science, and vice versa. My quilts can certainly benefit from a little more control from time to time. But I would say that I do these as separate things that are separate parts of who I am. So I'm not making mathematical quilts, directly related to mathematical themes. I am exploring the other part of my humanity, my commitment to human rights for everyone. And those expressions and my tendency to want to teach people about what's going on in the world and expose them to new ideas. Yeah, I hope that answers that question.
It did, because one of the things that I find interesting is that when quilters talk about improvisational quilting, I think a lot of people think it just means throwing a bunch of stuff together and not ever having any thought of precision or order or plan. And when you do that, because I've made that mistake, it looks just like what I said. You just threw a whole bunch of stuff together, and that improvisation is actually thoughtful and precise.
Yes. I am highly precise in my improv. Yes. Right. Especially because I use very small pieces and you can't be imprecise there. So, I absolutely agree. Yeah. And, I even stopped myself as I was explaining earlier that math was governed by a lot of rules, because actually in improvisation, the best outcomes usually come from setting a set of rules from the beginning that you kind of follow, that provide a boundary so that what you make doesn't look like clown barf, which is always a potential outcome.
I think what I struggle with is that I get very bored with following patterns. And quilter precision makes me crazy. This we all have to be perfect and all the points have to meet on one hand, but you can't totally abandon that in your improvisational work as well. So I'm still working on that. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, your most famous piece is about the murder of Eric Gardner and the I Can't Breathe quilt. And what have you been inspired beyond that quilt, which, has been seen all over the world and admired because it really illustrated sort of the end of that man's life? Have you been moved by any other social justice issue to create something, or at least have it planted in your head that there's something there?
Absolutely. So prior to the Eric Garner quilt, I made one for Trayvon Martin that is actually more of a representational art piece of self-portraits of myself in a hoodie, because the hoodie became iconic. That, on conservative media, it was stated, well, if he wasn't wearing the hoodie, there wouldn't have been a problem. He'd still be alive today, which is just this ridiculous politics of fashion statement. But I would say that currently I am exploring actually what it means to be alive as a Black person in the United States today, which of course brings with it the fear, daily fear of being here. And so I recently made a quilt it's a poem, and the last line is, "I am still not free." And the poem sort of builds up, I am still, I am not still, I am still not free. And it was just this reflection on how my life as a Black person in the United States is different from my neighbor's, who's a white woman, that day to day, I do not have the same freedoms as she does. And you only have to think about the case of Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed while taking a jog through his neighborhood, or Christian Cooper, who went to Central Park in New York to just look at birds. Just imagine that your hobby is looking at birds. And he asked a woman to put her dog back on leash, which of course is part of the law in the city. And she refused and immediately called the police and reported made a false report of assault on this Black man. And, just fully knowing what she was doing, he had the potential to be killed by the police when they showed up. And all he was trying to do was look at birds. Like, can you believe it? Now, I just, I cannot just keep letting this go on. I had to make the commentary. The back of that quilt is the preamble of the U.S. Constitution, just in case you didn't get the message from the front. This will be the theme that I continue exploring for a little while. What does it mean to live in the United States today?
Yeah, what does it mean to live in the United States today? It means that I don't want my son to grow up. He's 14. Mm-hmm. I wish he were still 11. Like how that's so crazy. But no, I don't, because now I'm afraid.
Right.
And I'm going to be afraid probably for as long as I live, which is not something I think that people realize and appreciate. So I appreciate your work because you reach a group of people who, shall we say, are in large part really conservative and are shocked and amazed by all the audacity that we have as quilters to actually speak up about injustice in America. Because after all we want to do is quilt. But let me ask you, if you weren't quilting and being a professor of mathematics, what would you be doing?
So what would I be doing if I weren't a professor or a dean? We play pretend when we're little kids, and typically we pretend to be the thing that we admire most. And my heroes were always my teachers. So I think that there's absolutely no doubt that I would be a teacher. And maybe not a professor, but absolutely a teacher somewhere, somehow, of anything. And it's just, I was on that path from the beginning. Now, it could be because I was a bossy little kid. And so when I was playing with my friends, I wanted to play, and we were playing school, I wanted to play the teacher, so then I would be in charge. But, maybe that's admitting too much. But yeah, I would absolutely be a teacher. There's no doubt that it's my calling.
So now we have a what we like to call a fun section of our program, and it's called Rapid Fire. And it's yes or no answers.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Are you ready?
I think so.
All right. Yes or no? Will robots ultimately come for your job?
No.
Is social media the best or the worst?
The worst. And the best. It's both.
And yes or no, does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes. Oh my gosh. How can this be debated? Pineapple and pepperoni, or pineapple and sausage, if I can go further than just a yes answer here. I don't know. It's sweet and salty.
I'm going to take your Jersey card.
Delicious. I never claimed to be from Jersey.
I understand. So, I'm so glad you came to be with us today. Is there anything else? One last question. Is there anything else you'd like for us to know before we wrap up?
It just, math is the best thing ever.
And what big ideas excite you now? That was two last questions, but
yeah. So there's, obviously grand unified theory. Can we truly understand the universe? What are black holes? Where will we be living in the future? Are we going to really be inhabiting Mars? I'm not sure. It's just, yeah, I'm more interested in like the frontiers of human life.
Oh, cool. Well, I am so delighted that you came to talk to us today here at What's the Big Idea. On our program, we'd like to acknowledge that this episode of What the Big Idea was recorded on land originally inhabited and cultivated by the Lenape and Chawne nations. We are grateful for this land and for the people who have stewarded it for generations. This episode was produced by Kelsey Selleck with additional material provided by Don Afero and Chris Beisel and music by Kevin MacLeod. Special thanks to our wonderful guest, Dr. Chawne Kimber, for joining us today. And you can learn more about Chawne and her work by checking her out on Instagram at Koshi Complete. And to learn more about our show and about how DI can fuel even more big ideas, visit us at destinationimagination.org. I'm Michele Tuck Ponder. Thanks for joining us and have a terrific day filled with big ideas.
The U.S. Department of Labor estimates that 65% of today's students will be employed in jobs that have yet to be invented. We have no way of knowing what those jobs will entail, but we do know that the skills that will prepare them for success are the skills that they can develop through Destination Imagination. Hi, I'm Chris Beisel, Director of Training for Destination Imagination. I was a team manager for 15 years and 22 teams before I joined the staff. Being a team manager was the best thing that I did for all my children. Destination Imagination, or DI, is an international project-based competition that reinforces the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. You probably heard about those skills in today's episode, and DI is the place where kids like yours develop those skills for themselves. Students work together in small teams to create solutions to a challenge. DI's team challenges fall into one of 7 categories: scientific, technical, engineering, fine arts, improvisation, service learning, and for our younger children, early learning. A DI team selects one of those 7 challenges and prepares a solution to present in the local tournament. Throughout the experience, students create projects, solve problems, build relationships, learn new concepts, and have a great time in the process. We're building the workforce of the future. Today's DI participants are tomorrow's innovators, problem solvers, and leaders. If that sounds like a good fit for you and the young people in your life, we would love to have you join us. To get started today, visit destinationimagination.org/learn more.